All right, first elephant in the room. I am wearing a camera on my hat. I don't normally wear hats, and I definitely feel like a big nerd wearing this, but I think it's going to give you the best view for what we're doing today. Hey guys, today we're going to be starting a series that I'm thinking of as Pottery for Beginners or Hand Building 101. I've decided to release two versions of this video, a long and a short version. The long version is for those of you who want to work along with me. You can just set this up and I'll be there working alongside you at regular pace. The short version has some areas that are sped up and cut for time to make it quicker paced and easier to absorb. Welcome to the short video. So if you're interested in the longer version, you can find a link to it in the video description. So let's jump into what we're gonna do. We're gonna make 2 pinch pots today. I recommend starting with about 3/4 of a pound of clay. You can work with less, but it might feel a little bit small in your hands. I have found that a pound of clay feels like too much, especially if you've not made a pinch pot before. We're just gonna start by making this into a sphere. I taught high school pottery for 6 years, and we always start with pinch pots because pinch pots teach you so much. And this takes a little bit of time, and that's okay. We really want to get rid of any corners. And while making a pinch pot like this may not seem as exciting as throwing on the wheel, you can also do really cool stuff like this. Now it's a sphere. Now, I'm not too worried about there being any wrinkles. I can smooth those out to make sure they're not on my final pot. Little like dips like this one here, I can kind of use my thumb to press out. But we just want to get rid of any corners and make it a ball and then smooth over any sort of cracks. And that's just going to make our job easier as we're making this. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to make 2 pots today. Usually when I teach this, we make 2 pots just because if you just make one, you'll have some downtime when you need to wait for one pot to dry while you work on the other one. So instead of just sitting there twiddling our thumbs, we're going to use our time wisely. Really, to get this into round, what I'm doing here is I'm hitting it with this part of my hand, and I'm hitting it anywhere that I feel like there's a ridge or a corner. So that's like this. So I pick it up, rotate it, hit it on a corner, pick it up, rotate it, hit it on a corner. And I just keep working my way around until it is a ball. I have had a couple of times where students were really good at making it into a cylinder because they were just going around in one direction. See how that makes a cylinder shape? And it left it kind of flat, but that creates a corner. It's a circular corner, but it's a corner up there, and we need this to be a ball. So if you have a high point, if you have a corner, if you have a ridge, hit it. So I'm hitting it with this part of my hand, this part of my hand, whatever doesn't hurt. If this is hurting, your clay is too hard, or you're not hitting it with a good part of your hand. The other thing I'm doing is I'm not hitting it with the flat. I am letting my hand curve to kind of cushion that blow. So when I hit it, my hand may come in flat, but it folds around the clay, so that way I'm not hurting myself. And to shape the clay better. So now I have 2 balls of clay because we're going to make 2 pots. I'm going to put 1 ball into my plastic here. I'm going to wrap it up until I'm ready to use it, and I'll go ahead and just kind of like wipe some water on it to keep it from drying out. One of the things you're going to pay attention to while you're making your pinch pot is how wet your clay is. You want to pay attention to how the clay moves based on how dry it is, because you'll notice as it loses water, as some of that water evaporates while we're working on it, it's going to move differently. At first, it's going to be very plastic. It's going to be very flexible. And as we keep working on it, as it dries out, it's going to get stiffer. And that's a good thing, right? Because we want it very flexible at first when we're going to make all these big movements. And then as we keep going, we're going to want it to hold its shape a little bit better and make smaller movements and smaller changes. So I have this ball of clay. I'm going to hold it in the palm of my hand, just like this. I'm going to take my other hand. I'm going to place my thumb right at the top here. And what we're going to do is we're going to plunge our thumb all the way in until it feels like we're 1/4 to a 1/2 inch away from touching or from pushing through to your palm. You don't want to push all the way through. We don't want a hole, but you do want to push your thumb in pretty far. So one thing you can do is you can lay your thumb on here and look at how much clay is left between the tip of your thumb and where your hand is cradling the clay. And then notice where that is on your thumb. For me, that's up here at my knuckle. So I know if I push my thumb into the clay up to my knuckle, then I will be fine. I shouldn't pierce through, and I should be how deep I mean to be. If you have long nails, go cut them real quick, because this is going to be unpleasant if you have long nails. So now I'm going to put my thumb right here, and I'm going to start to press. And I'm using my fingers here on the back of my hand to help me with that if I need to. And there we go. All the way in, okay? And that's okay if it changed the shape of the ball a little bit, that's okay. Now that I've got a hole there, I'm going to start to pinch the clay a little bit at a time. We're not going to make a big impression just yet. We're just going to put our thumb in there. And what you want to do is you want a movement that looks kind of like this, where you're just pinching your thumb just a little bit. We're not trying to move everything. So you're going to put your thumb in there and just press it towards your fingers that are on the outside of the clay. All right, and you can see my fingers straining there because I'm doing that. Then release. You're going to rotate a little bit, and then you're going to do it again. Release, rotate, pinch. Release, rotate, pinch. Now this side of my clay, as I'm pinching it, feels thinner than this side because I didn't put my thumb straight down the middle like I should have. So I'm not going to pinch as much on this side because it's already thin. All right, so now if I pull my thumb out, I can see down in there, and you probably can't see it on camera, but I can see down in there that I've created a little bit of a well in there. So now I'm going to put my thumb back in. That first time I went around the bottom, I want you to imagine that you have a bottom ring, a middle ring, and a top ring that we're going to go around. So we've gone around the bottom ring. Now we're going to move the thumb up and our fingers up to go around the middle ring. We're going to pinch here. And again, it's just a small pinch. We're not making a big change right now. Keep going all the way until you've gone all the way around. And you should be able to see where that is based on like the little pinches on the outside of the clay and the way that the clay feels thinner or thicker. So I've gone all the way around the middle. Now I'm going to go all the way around that top section. We're going to make a closed form first. Closed form means that the opening is smaller than the body. So we want the hole to stay about this size. It's going to get bigger, but you want to aim to not make that hole bigger. So now, instead of my thumb pinching this way, I'm actually going to turn it up like this. I'm going to change my angle so that in the clay I'm pinching more up. And I'm just going all the way around here. You see my little fingerprints here from pinching on the outside and the inside. So now I've got more of a hole in the middle, more of an opening. I can look down in there and see okay. Now this clay is super thick, probably like an inch thick, because that's how much we pinched it. I want to look back at our 3 rings, right? I've got the top ring, the middle ring, and the bottom ring where I've pinched it so far. I want to go back to that bottom ring and I want to do another pass around it. This time, as I'm going, I really want to feel how thick that clay feels in each area compared to the other areas. So like right here already feels thin comparatively. So I'm going to skip that and I'm going to go over here where it feels thicker and I'm going to try to pinch it to get it as thin as where it felt thin. All right, so right here, how thin this is, I'm going to go back to where it feels thicker and try to pinch it to feel about the same thickness. So that's feeling pretty uniform. I'm going to move up to my middle ring now. Okay, so I'm pinching, I'm going around the edge here. Now, as you're pinching, that clay has to go somewhere. It's going up, it's going down, it's going out. So as you pinch, you are changing the form of your pot. It's going to get bigger. All right, right here feels kind of thin. Right here feels a little bit thicker, so I'm going to pinch there. All right, I'm going to go all the way around, just doing little pinches to feel if it feels all the same thickness, and it's feeling a lot better. Let's go around that top ring again. As I'm pinching down further, you'll notice that this part of your thumb is probably pulling the mouth of your pot open. So when I go around the top, not only am I pinching at a different angle to keep that mouth closed, I also am going to use my fingers to push the clay towards my thumb this way so that that mouth of the pot gets pushed back in. So we're kind of correcting for it being opened. See how it moves back towards my thumb? Here feels really thick, so I'm going to try to push that out some more. Definitely change the direction you're pinching to push the clay the direction you want it to go. Okay, now let's just feel around the lip here. So this part, the opening here, this is the lip or the rim. So we want to feel around here. We want it to all feel like the same thickness. That feels about as thick as my pinky finger. Then I want to go back down, and here feels a little bit thicker. So I'm going to try to keep pinching that down and out to be the same thickness as the lip. Okay, so now instead of having 3 sections of my pot, this is going to kind of change because my pot's getting bigger. I've got more surface area to cover. And you probably noticed that I changed directions. Doesn't matter, just felt right. Now, as it gets bigger, it's going to get a little bit harder to work on the bottom. So we want to make sure that we get the bottom nice and thin or to the correct thickness before we really enlarge the rest of the pot. Some of you are probably worried about these cracks here. These are not a big deal. All I have to do is just smooth over them with my thumb or my fingers, and that's going to happen naturally when I'm working on pinching. Okay, so that's not a big deal. Around your lip, you do want to keep track of those because as you're pinching that clay out, those can crack and fray. Go ahead and smooth those out now because they're a little bit harder to fix later. So it's looking like a pot now. If we look inside, you've got a good view probably. So now we want to work on the foot. The foot is just the bottom of the pot that it sits on, right? Right now, it rocks because we just started with the sphere and we pushed it out into a circle. One thing that I see a lot of students do is that they start putting their pot on the table and pinching it on the table. If you start working like this instead of in your hand, yeah, you form a nice flat bottom, but you're also going to make a thick corner right here. I don't want you to put this on your table. I want you to keep this in your hand because your hand's going to cradle it better. The other thing we want to do is kind of push that bottom out with your thumb. And I'm not actually doing a pinch right now. Right now, I'm doing kind of a swipe and just feeling that clay move, right? Because my hands aren't quite big enough to actually do a pinch. Now, the other thing we can do here is I can start to use my fingers instead of my thumb on the inside. And I'm going to press this part into my palm. And instead of trying to pinch between my fingers, now I'm pinching between my fingers and my palm. And instead of just doing a press motion, I'm actually going to do a swipe. So a press motion is going to give me indentions like this, whereas a swipe motion is actually going to start to smooth the clay and create a nicer shape. So I'm going to start with my fingers kind of over here and then swipe them this way, but on the inside. You should be able to feel that pressure on the palm of your hand. And instead of just trying to go like straight across this way, I'm kind of going in a swirl or a sideways motion. And I'm rotating the pot in a circle so that I can keep working on all parts of it. Notice how the mouth of my pot is getting bigger. That's definitely bigger than when it only fit my thumb. That's okay. When we get up to this part, we're going to pinch it to make it a little bit smaller if needed. Okay, but this is a closed form. The mouth of the pot is smaller than the belly. That's all we want. It doesn't have to be super tight. Having a small opening can be nice, but as long as the mouth opening is smaller than the belly or the widest part of the pot, it is a closed form. So I'm going to start working my way up the side. So I'm going to start, instead of working on the bottom here, working up here. So I've got my fingers in there, pinch and swiping that clay up against the palm of my other hand. And you may start to notice your clay developing cracks depending on the type of clay you're using. Some clays are more prone to this than others. We don't really have to worry about that. We will fix that as we work. We can kind of like swipe it as we're pinching, and that'll fill in some of those cracks. One thing that I see beginner potters or my students do that isn't helpful is they'll take water and just wipe it over with their sponge. That hides cracks because what it does is creates a little bit of slip on the surface and it makes it look cleaner, but you haven't actually fixed the real problem. You've just filled the cracks with water, and it's dirty water because it's got clay in it. So as that dries, those cracks can actually get wider and be more prominent. So I don't recommend adding water to fix your clay at this point because your clay is already so wet. So now I've gone around this level and I've gone around the middle a little bit. If we pinch here, so if I pinch between my thumb and first finger here, I can feel that that feels like it's this thick. That's something that you may not be able to do, especially on your first pot, but as you get more experience making pottery, working with clay, you'll be able to pinch and go, okay, that feels like it's like that thick. Down here feels like it's like this thick. But now I'm going to move up. So right here what I'm doing is I've got my fingers on the outside to support the clay. You always want to support the clay when you're moving it. If I'm putting pressure on the inside, I want to put equal or softer pressure on the outside to support it as well. And what I'm doing with my thumb is kind of pinching a little bit and then swiping up, and that's going to make a nice smooth surface on the inside. And let me kind of check how thick all my clay is. And I can feel like right here's a little bit thinner or thicker, so I'm going to work on it a little bit more. This is a little bit thinner, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. And I can actually push some of that clay back in, so push it back in and push some of this thickness down. This part feels thicker, so I'm going to start to work up here. Instead of down here, try to work up here. And I'm going to push that clay out, so I'm doing this kind of motion on the inside, pushing that clay out. You see how it pops out? So supporting that clay is going to help prevent me from pushing it too far, creating a lot of cracks, accidentally breaking the clay. Okay, so I'm working around this ring here. And now the lip feels thicker than right below the lip. So now I'm going to work on the lip a little bit. So I've got some cracks here. I'm going to take my serrated rib and just kind of scratch that up. That's just going to change the way the clay is, pushing it into those cracks. You could just do that just with pressure, but the serrated rib makes this a little bit easier. Again, I'm not adding water because my clay is already so wet that I'm able to move it this much. If my clay was getting drier, it might make sense. And you can see I can just press that clay down and get rid of all those score marks, which means my clay is wet enough to take this, that I don't need to add water. Now I'm going to work on bringing this mouth, this lip inward to make it a little bit smaller and also thinner. So I'm going to put my thumb here to support, and I'm going to do most of the pinching with my fingers. I'm going to press that clay towards my thumb. So not only like squish this way, but also pulling the clay up this way. And that's going to tell that clay, instead of just going wherever you want, I want you to move inward. I want you to move up my thumb towards the rest of my hand. And I don't really have a round shape anymore, so I can work on that as well. Just really pushing that clay where it's out of round, back into round. And I can also do something like this where I push it like this, or like this, and kind of like, if it feels like there's a corner, push that corner out. And I'm just using the natural shape of my thumb to become the slope of the outside of the pot. And we really just want to make sure that the lip stays an even thickness. It's okay if this is not a perfect circle. I can make this more of a organic shape here, especially on your first pot. Don't worry about that too much. That can be something you worry about on your second pot. We're getting to a point where the pot feels pretty good, right? It feels like we've made a pot, we've got a thing, but I bet it's heavier and I bet the walls are thicker than you think. So let's do a little measurement here. First thing we want to do is we want to put our fingers at the very bottom of the pot here. Thumb or finger, whatever you can reach with. Okay, and then my finger's right there. I want you to take your needle tool and we're going to poke it through the clay until it touches your finger. Go slow so you don't stab yourself. And once you feel it kind of prick your finger, don't keep pushing. Put your pointer finger on the outside, your fingernail or the tip of your pointer finger, right up against the bottom of the pot. And you can see when I pull that out like this, that's how thick my clay is. So about a 1/2 inch thick there. So if I put this up against a ruler, I can see that it is a 1/2 inch thick. We want to aim for 3/8 to a 1/4 of an inch thick. If a 1/2 inch is here, we want to go make it just a little bit thinner to 3/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch thick. So it's just almost twice as thick as we want it to be. One thing that often happens to new potters is that the bottom of their pot is much heavier, much thicker than the top of their pot. So let's do some other measurements here. If you kind of have a corner happening here, which a lot of new potters will, we want to check through a corner here. I don't have a corner, so I'm just going to think about like if this is where the pot sits and this is the wall, this is like the vertical space, I want to go somewhere in between there. And I just want to go through until I feel it barely prick my finger on the inside. check that thickness. So that's about the same thickness, maybe just slightly less than a 1/2 inch thick. So don't be surprised if you measure here and this is a 1/2 inch thick, and then you measure here and you have a corner and it's a whole inch or 3/4 of an inch thick. That happens a lot, especially if you put your pot on the table and like press the clay down. It builds up sort of a donut on your pot there. So let's go up to the middle here. Let's see how thick this is. I'm going to put this in, pull it out. See, that's thinner, not a lot thinner. You might find that yours is a lot thinner here. Let's do it right below the lip. Yep, pretty even. And then on the lip, you can just look at it. But if you really want to, you can also go right here on the lip. So it is thinner there for me. You may find that the differences in thickness are more extreme for you, especially if this is your first time making a pinch pot or you haven't been doing this for very long. So what we want to do is we really want to get those walls to be even thickness. So now that we recognize the top part of the pot is thinner than the bottom part of the pot, we want to make sure we work on thinning out or pinching that bottom portion more before we work on the top again. And your pot is going to get bigger. There's so much more clay here. One other thing you need to be aware of is that how wet your clay is going to determine how much control you have over it. So if the clay feels like it's getting away from you or you can't do anything with it, like if you pinch it, it kind of like messes everything up, we'll set it aside and we'll work on the other one here in just a moment. Okay, but I'm going to work on the bottom of my pot just a little bit more. And also these holes, as we pinch and just kind of like swipe the clay around, we can fill those back in. So I'm not worried about them. Now, if you need to let the mouth of your pot open up more here so that you can really work on the bottom of it, that makes complete sense. Do that. We've looked at how to make that opening a little bit smaller. And also remember, as long as the belly of your pot is wider than the mouth, it is a closed form, so we don't have to worry. We're not trying to make it super tall, so it's okay if it's more squat. It's okay if that clay gets pushed outward rather than downward. Okay, and I'm just doing more swiping pinches here. So I've gone across the bottom, I've gone across this portion, I'm going across the middle, and then I'll go across the upper portion and really bring that lip back in, using my fingers to push out on the inside and using my thumb to bring that clay up and inward on the outside. Now here, where my clay is completely torn, you can use your needle tool to scratch across that, or if you have a serrated rib like this, you can use that to kind of score across there. If that hole is pretty big, you can add some water, dab it a little bit, and then pinch that clay back down and inward to bring it back together. And if it's too slippery, let it dry for a second, let that water soak in, and then come back to it. But be careful about just adding water and then leaving the clay. That's not going to fix anything. Water does not fix cracks. Water is like glue. If you don't stick the pieces together, then the glue is not going to do anything. So I can dab it like that, but then I really have to put the pressure on the clay to get it to stick back to itself. Really trying to get that shape back and around. And I'm going to push out the middle a little bit more here. And then before I set this aside, I'm going to do some smoothing on the outside, and then I'll come back to it to finish it up. To get rid of big cracks on the outside like this, it's a good idea to take your needle tool and score across it, or use your serrated rib to scratch it. And then you can use the smooth side of your rib to scrape over it. And I didn't even need water for that, right? I could use water, but water can also get in the way. I'm going to go over a couple more spots like that. This is not my final texture. I'm just trying to get rid of really bad cracks right now before they develop into something worse. So I just want to make sure before I set this aside to stiffen up that I've gotten rid of any big cracks, because once the clay starts to firm up, it's going to be harder to get rid of big cracks. Little surface cracks will be fine, and we'll probably add more cracks as we're working on it more. There's one of the holes, so I'm just going to go over that. And what's happening here is we're creating raised points of the clay, and then with the rib, we're kind of smushing them to fill them back in. So moving the clay around more helps create more smooth and more stable surface. And again, you don't have to do this with the rib. You could score over it with your needle tool. Smaller cracks you can just smooth over with a swipe of your finger or your thumb. If you feel like you need water, just get a little bit on your fingers and really make sure you're compressing that clay to really move the clay around. You're not just swiping or gliding over it. Because if you're just swiping water on the clay, you could actually be making the problem worse. So at this point, I'm going to put this pot aside for a little bit to make sure that it gets a nice foundation, a nice foot. I'm going to set it on my table and just gently tap it a couple times. And I just want to make sure that if I push on it, it comes back and sits right. It doesn't flop over. It's okay if it wobbles. We just don't want it to wobble over. Now we won't sign it until it's done, but we'll sign it on that flat portion. So normally I would just set this down off to the side, get out my second ball of clay and start working, but I need my little camera to recharge, so I'm gonna actually wrap this up. So you could do that as well. If you've worked on it as much as you wanna work on it today, wrap it up in a bag. We don't want a lot of air circulation. So you could wrap it up in some loose plastic like this, and you just wanna make sure that that plastic is in contact with the wall of the pot. We can't help the air that's in the inside pocket. So you just want to wrap that up really nicely. Tuck the tail under the pot if you can to keep it from opening up. If you have like a bag, you can also use that. So like I have this bag from some clay that I could use. One thing you can do here, especially if you're going to be leaving your pot like overnight or for a couple of days, is spritz some water in here. So I've just got a little spray bottle. This is just water. And just put a little water in the bag. Put my pot in there. And then when I close it, I'm going to make sure that plastic is resting against the pot. And I've pressed as much air out of the bag as possible. I can put it away like that for the day or for a few hours or whatever I need. You can also do this with like a gallon-sized baggie, but again, you want to press all that extra air out if you're going to be leaving it for a while. If you're just going to come back to it in an hour or so, leave it out. If you're going to work on your other pot for a little while and then come back to this one, just set it out because we want it to dry a little bit, but if you're going to be gone for a while, you want to wrap it up. And it doesn't matter how tightly you close that bag if there's air in it. So you got to get as much air out as possible.
All right, I'm back. We had to take a bit of a break there. It started raining too hard to capture good audio. But that's fine. Typically, when I taught this to high school, we would spend 3 to 5 class periods on it. So you could totally do this project in one day, in one sitting, or you could spread it out over several days, like I've had to do. If you're still working on it same day, we've set aside this pot. We're gonna get out our second pot, but if you've had to step away, we're gonna check on this pot real quick. It's been raining, it's been humid here, so I'm probably fine. But if you live, especially like in a drier climate, you'll definitely want to do this. So what I'm checking for here is how flexible my clay is. If it can easily squish like this, it doesn't need to be any wetter than that. It doesn't need to have any more water in it. I am gonna fix that little crack that I made in the lip. But if your clay is drier, if it's a little bit stiff and you can't really change its shape that easily, you can consider spraying the bag with some water. So just take like a little spray bottle, spray the bag, spray your pot. I'm not actually gonna put my pot back in there because my pot is too wet. But you can put some water in your bag or on your pot, wrap it up nice and tight, not a lot of air in it, and that'll keep your pot from drying out more while we're working on the second pot. Let me go ahead and fix this up real quick. If your clay is on the more flexible side, if it has more water in it like mine, then we're not actually gonna put it back in the bag. We'll just set it aside somewhere in your workspace where it won't get accidentally nudged or bumped. Then we're gonna hop right into this second pot. So when I taught this lesson, I like to work on 2 pots at a time. In case we got to a good stopping point the same day, we could keep working on the second pot. Of course, if you just wanna work on 1 pot at a time, you could just do one, take a break for the rest of the day, come back and check on it. But I find that when you're doing pottery, you really have to learn to multitask and do multiple pots at once so that you're not wasting a lot of downtime. Okay, so let's remember how to start here. We've got our ball, right? We've made it into a sphere. No corners here, smooth out any bad cracks. And then we're gonna start this pot the same way, but this first pot we did a closed form. Now we're gonna do a bowl. Okay, so we're gonna take our thumb. Remember, we've got our clay in our palm of our hand. We're gonna press our thumb into it until we feel like we're just about to break through the clay and touch the palm of our hand. All right there. And if you remember that trick, I know that the length of my thumb up to my knuckle is a comfortable place for me to stop because I laid my thumb here and said, okay, there's a good bit of clay, but not too much. Now, I've got that little hole plunged. I'm gonna put my thumb back in here, and remember, we're just gonna do that little pinch. It's not a big pinch, it's just a slight movement of the thumb, and we're gonna go all the way around that bottom layer, if you think about that layer around the foot, pinching more where the clay feels thicker. Okay, so I've gone all the way around. Now I'm gonna go around the middle. We're going faster this time because we have a better idea of what we're doing. Okay, then I'm gonna go around the top. And remember, this first time, we're just doing little pinches, just opening up that air pocket inside. Okay, so now you can see there's a little bit more of a hole. We're gonna repeat that. We're gonna go back around. Now, we are gonna make a bowl, right? So closed form, mouth is smaller than the body of the pot. Mouth is smaller than the body, okay? This sticks out more than this. Definition of a bowl, the foot is smaller than the lip, and we have a gradual transition from the foot to the lip, and the wall of the pot never gets wider than the lip. The lip is the widest point of a pot on a bowl.
I have not opened up the lip yet. We're gonna need to do that before it starts to get thin because that clay, you have to have enough clay to spread out. Okay, and this pot actually will be a little bit easier than the first one, but I wanted to teach you to control the clay with the first one, right? So now we understand control the clay. Now we can control it and make this bowl bigger with intention. So I'm gonna go around the foot again. So I've got my fingers near the bottom and I'm pinching. And remember, we're feeling how thick that clay is and we're trying to pinch it to be even. So if I've got a thinner spot, I'm not gonna pinch as hard. Whereas I'm going to pinch more in a thicker spot. Now I'm going to move up to here, to the middle. Keep pinching, pushing that clay out with my thumb. Now the clay's moving, hopefully, two ways, out and up. Okay, and then I'm going to work my way up to here, and I'm actually going to start to push the lip out a little bit. So I'm working here, but you can see I'm allowing the clay of the lip to be pushed out a little bit at a time. We don't want to push it too fast because it'll crack. And we're doing some pinches that also compress the clay. Okay, so now it's getting more open. So I'm going to take some time and smooth out this lip, make sure I'm not developing any cracks. And it's going to feel a little bit funny here because last time we were making sure that the lip stayed small, but this time we're going to let it get big. Okay, so I've got a good view inside of there. Lots of finger marks. We're going to smooth those out by the time this is done. This side is feeling a little bit thinner than this side, so I'm going to push this side out more. And whenever I'm pinching, I'm not just doing a flat pinch. I'm directing that clay by either smoothing it sideways, right? Going like this, or smoothing it up, or pressing it down. I'm always telling that clay which way to go when I pinch it. So right now I'm smoothing it down to make a nice smooth lip all the way around. And then right here where it's cracking, I'm gonna go left to right, really blend it in. Okay, now I don't wanna do a lot of pinches down because that's gonna make my foot too thick. But now it's more open. I'm gonna start doing those pinches where I use my fingers pressed up against the clay, pressed up against my palm. And I'm gonna feel how thick that foot is, and I'm gonna start to press this way and really start pushing that clay outward and making a bigger foot. It's going to be tempting here to start putting your clay on your work surface and pressing down, but that's going to create a really thick corner here. So let's go ahead and use our needle tool to kind of measure how thick our clay is right now. So remember, we're going to put our fingers into the foot here, just like this, and then we're going to press the needle directly into the foot until it just barely pricks your finger but doesn't actually hurt you. Then we're going to put our finger right here. Put your finger right here. Put your nail or the tip of your finger up against the clay. Pull it out. See how thick that is? That's pretty thick. We want to aim for about that thick, right? So we're going from 1/2 inch to 3/8 of an inch, hopefully. Okay, let's check out the sides while we're here. So this is the area that I really have to watch out for, that corner right here between where the foot transitions into the wall of the pot is usually the area where we're most likely to have extra clay. That's the same thickness. I'm real experienced. If yours is like this, don't be surprised, okay? Then I'm gonna go up here. This part feels thicker, so I bet this comes out thicker. Yeah, a little bit thicker. And let's do one more near the lip, which feels a little bit thinner to me. So we're doing this, and that's gonna help you kind of learn to feel how thick your clay is, right? If I pinch this and I think, oh, that feels thick, and then I confirm that it is thick by piercing it and measuring it with the needle tool, then I've established in my head with my fingers like a feeling for how thick is too thick. Okay, so now I'm gonna kind of blur those little points, smooth them out, and start to move that clay. Okay, so we're gonna continue to work on the foot. So I'm gonna go around the foot again here. And I want to push the clay outward because I want this bowl to open up. So I'm going up and pushing that clay out and always supporting the outside. So whenever I'm putting pressure on the inside, I've got my hand supporting the outside so that I don't lose control of the clay. Now I want to keep moving this clay outward. I don't necessarily want it to get taller. So if I don't want it to get taller, I don't want to move my thumb up. I want to move my thumb side to side. So now I'm going to start actually using my fingers here, doing a pinch and swipe. So I'm pressing down into my palm and swiping that clay sideways and a little up because that's just comfortable for me. And that's going to keep opening that clay up wider. And as you start to go, you'll notice that you're going to develop cracks here in the lip of your pot. Can you see that? Okay, so as we're developing cracks, I'm going to go around here and just compress that clay, swipe that clay sideways to really smooth it out, get rid of those cracks before they turn into crevices. Now I'm going to keep working. If I feel here, this feels thinner than here, so I know I haven't worked at this level, at this layer yet. So I'm going to keep going. Got my thumb inside, I'm swiping it, and I'm using my fingers on the outside to support. And honestly, I just do what feels right in the moment, right? So you could be pinching this way, you could be pressing it against the palm of your hand. Just do whatever feels like it's working for you, okay? There's lots of ways to pinch, and you don't have to do it exactly in the same order that I am. As you gain more experience, you'll learn what works best for you. Another thing about switching it up, that's going to keep your hand from getting tired, right? That's going to keep you from losing momentum because your hand is cramping up from doing the same motion over and over again. Now I'm going to go around the lip here. Now one thing that's going to happen because this is a pinch pot, maybe your first ever, is you're going to get probably an organic lip. That's going to be our fancy art word here. An organic lip just means it's not perfectly level. I'm not going to worry about that. First pinch pot, why do I care? So long as the lip is intentional, so it's not cracked, it's not out of control, it still feels nice, we're going to enjoy that organic shape. Right here's thicker, so I'm going to push that out a little bit more. So really focus on those areas that are thicker than the rest of the pot. Try to even it out. We want all of the wall to be the same thickness. Now this is still tall, and I really want to open it out, right? We want a bowl shape. So I'm going to keep compressing that lip here. So I'm actually just pressing it down, smoothing out those cracks that are developing as I go. One thing that happens here to beginners a lot is that they pinch the same amount all the way through. When they get to their lip, they pinch it way too thin, paper thin like that. And that's going to develop cracks that are like impossible to fix without just starting over. If that happens to you, don't feel bad about starting over. I would have students who wanted to start over all the time, not a big deal. But I'm just going to press that back in. I put some water on it, press it back. We want to keep the lip a little bit thicker so that it doesn't feel finished yet. We want to keep that lip thick so that it can withstand all the movement that we're putting it through because we want it to get wider. We've got to have that clay there to stretch out. Okay, so I'm going to keep swiping here, pinching, swiping. Right now I'm pulling it out with my thumb. Remember to always have that support on the opposite side so that you don't tear through your clay. So I'm going around the bottom because I want the foot to be wider. The more experience you have, the more you can understand what different pinches are going to do, how your work is going to affect your clay. So I'm just tapping it right here to start developing that foot being wider. And I am working it on the table right now, but I'm not pressing down. I'm just allowing the table to support it while I pinch it on both sides and pull it out. Okay, at this point, if we keep pinching it thinner and thinner, the clay is so wet that it may collapse and we may lose control of it. So if you get to a point where you're like, I just feel like I'm not making progress anymore, we're about to set this pot aside and go back to our first pot. The one thing I am gonna do right now is just go around and get rid of little cracks and bad textures that have developed. I don't need them to be perfect right now. All I need right now is to get rid of really bad ones so that they don't get worse when we continue to stretch the clay out. So right now, this clay isn't as thin as I can get it, but it's as thin as I can get it while this clay is this wet. The amount that I can move this clay is too much. I want it to move more slowly, more methodically. We're gonna come back to it after it's had some time to dry. So really, before you set this aside, make sure you've gone around your lip, that you don't have any cracks, because as that clay is drying, those cracks are gonna set in and they're gonna be harder to fix. There's this weird thing in pottery where we talk about clay having a memory. It makes the most sense. It's the easiest way to talk about how clay, once it gets set into a shape, it's hard to get it to change back. Especially like porcelain, really not good for hand building. It has too strong of a memory. Good for throwing because you want to change its shape once. So different clays have stronger memories. What that means is basically, if I make this pot into this shape, it's going to be hard later, or as it dries, as I keep working on it, to really modify that shape a lot. I can keep pushing it into more of a bowl shape, but now that it's here, it's going to be harder if I wanted to bring that lip back in, or if I wanted to push the belly out. It's going to be harder to do that. I think a lot of this has to do with the water content. If this is the clay, if I take this and I bend it like this, now I've pushed water out of this side and pushed all the clay particles closer together. So if I try to lay it back out, there's not water in there anymore. So those clay particles may want to move back together, and as it dries, there's more water down here, so it's going to curl up. It is possible to move back and forth. Some clays are better at moving. I think clays that have more grog are better at this because they have less water held in them. But when we say clay has a memory, we just mean like once you move it in one direction, if you try to straighten that back out or do something different with it, sometimes as it dries, it will move back to that shape, like it remembers where it was before. And it's just a weird thing, and as you get more used to the clay you're using and used to doing pottery, you'll kind of learn how much you can push your clay and how much you can do with it to negate that. So I'm going to set this bowl aside. The clay is really wobbly, right? I can do a lot with it right now. I want to set it aside until it stiffens up a bit, and then I can make the walls even thinner. And it's not perfectly even right now. I'm not worried about that. I'm going to even it out later. So I'm going to pick up this pot. Now the clay is cold. As clay dries, as it loses water, it'll feel cold. So being cold is good because that means the clay is getting stiffer. This part is still a little bit flexible. I don't want to crack it again, but this part's feeling pretty firm. So I can continue to push this clay thinner, and it doesn't have so much water in it now, so I can only move it a little bit, but it's also stronger, and so it can support its weight while it's thinner. I'm going to start at the foot, and I'm going to really push that clay here to be thinner, and I'm going to push it against the palm of my hand here. Really try to swipe some of that clay out from the foot to the wall. I'm just going around and doing that. This pot's going to be harder to get it smooth on the inside, so just do your best. If you have long fingernails and you really want to get into pottery, I recommend cutting them, getting used to having shorter fingernails. I don't like super short fingernails, but I don't let them get longer than the tips of my fingers. So I've gone around the foot a couple times. Hopefully it's not too rough. Hopefully I don't have any fingernail marks. I'm going to start to go around this portion now. And I'm really swiping sideways, and I want you to see this, how much. Can you see that I'm pushing the clay out? Ooh, cracked a little bit there. Let's take care of that. I was trying too hard. So you see I put water on it, smoothed it a bit, dried my thumb, came back, smoothed it a little bit more. Water is not what fixes cracks, okay? Remember that. Pressure is what fixes cracks, but water lets our fingers glide, pushing that clay out into my hand. And that's why you always do it into your hand so you don't get cracks like that. So you can see working down there has kind of opened up the lip here a bit and put some cracks in it. So I'm going to take a little time, put a little love in there. This one is particularly bad, so I'm going to do some scoring in there, really tear it up a bit more. Then I'm going to put some water in there, almost like I'm joining two pieces of new clay. I'm going to set this down so I can work on it better. Really bring that clay together. I'm going to push it down into itself and also swipe it back and forth. Really blend that clay together. What's really annoying is once you get a deep crack somewhere, if you don't really get it put back together, it'll keep cracking in that same spot because clay has a memory. But hopefully by the time we're done, we're able to really join that back together and it doesn't develop as it dries. Okay, so I'm just scoring across that crack because that's gonna help join the clay back together. All right, let's keep working down further. Okay, so I'm gonna go around this level here. So just pick like a ring, like I'm picturing like there's a ring here, maybe the middle and here and the lip, maybe like 5 rings. But just pick a level that you're working on and keep working at that level all the way around. That's gonna help keep your pot more symmetrical. If an area feels thicker, put some more effort into it. If it feels thinner, be more careful around it. Okay, I'm moving up to my center layer. I'm doing like a out and up motion because I want that clay to turn into a belly, to be pushed out. And I also want the pot to get either fatter or taller. I'm fine with both. Now, this may start to make like ridges. I don't know if you can see, it kind of feels like bumps here. So then if I do a swipe, instead of going this way, if I go this way, that's gonna help even that out and make it feel more smooth and less like ridges like that. Now I'm gonna move up a layer. I'm really lifting that belly. I don't want it to turn into a shoulder, okay? So pot anatomy, belly is in the middle, shoulder is near the lip. I don't want, for my form, to have the shoulder be wider. I want the belly to be wider. You could do a shoulder, right? Because it's just a closed form. Just the lip is smaller than the rest of the pot. Okay, so I'm asking this clay to do a lot and it's complaining a little bit. It's cracking, and that's okay. Now notice my lip has not gotten bigger. If you find that your lip is getting bigger while you're doing this, you're probably pressing this part of your hand into the lip as you're doing that work. So make sure you're not putting pressure on the lip as you're widening the rest of the pot. Now, as you get closer to the lip, remember we're gonna do that trick where we kind of push up with the thumb, but we swipe towards your thumb with these fingers to help that lip stay nice and small. If you know how to make coils, once you're done here, you could add coils on here, make a nice tall like neck, to make like a bud vase or something. It's not what I'm doing in this video, but that's totally a direction you could go. So a couple things. If your lip is not perfectly round and that's really bothering you, you say things like, I'm a little OCD, I'm a perfectionist, I gotta have it perfect. There are ways that we can adjust this, but I also encourage you to accept imperfection. Early on in your pottery making experience, if you stop and you obsess over one part of a pot, you're not gonna grow. We've gotta try new things. We've gotta make new pots. This pot, especially if it's your first one ever or your first pinch pot, don't expect it to be your best. That's okay. I mean, it's your best so far, and your best doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. So I can do things like push this in to kind of adjust that roundness, push in here, right? You can see it's still pretty flexible, but if the unevenness is really bothering you, like this part is really tall, I can cut this part off. So I'll take my needle tool and just draw a little line here like this. And then I'm gonna do that a couple more times. Always do 3 or more passes to cut through, especially leather hard clay. Otherwise, if you rush it, you're gonna do more damage, especially because this isn't sharp. If I had like a sharp knife, I might be able to do it a bit faster, okay? So I've cut this off. That's about the same height, so I'm gonna cut right here. The other thing I can do is I can use that cut off part to fill in low points, and I wanna show you that too. So I wanna clean this up. I'm gonna use a little bit of water, just a dab. So now I can look at this, and this is a lot more even. Maybe this spot is a little bit low. So what I can do there is I can take a little bit of this clay. I don't want to get new clay. I want to use this clay because this is the same age as this clay. So they have like the same amount of water in them. I'm going to do some scoring right here. And you may not have to do this. You can just accept that the pot lip is going to be uneven. That can be a stylistic choice. That's fine. So I'm just scoring this, which just means roughing it up, scratching it up with my needle tool. Then I'm going to take this little piece. I'm also going to score it. And anytime you make an attachment like this, especially with drier clay, we're gonna put water in those score marks. Some potters might say that you need to use slip. That's true sometimes. You don't always have to use slip. And then we're gonna put this together, and all those little messed up pieces of clay are gonna get intertwined and work to get together, and I'm really gonna press this in and try to blend it in. Now, one thing I like to do when I'm making an attachment like this, I like to take a little break in there between when I first attach the two pieces and when I actually blend them together, because sometimes slip or water can make the two pieces too slippery. And so instead of being actually stuck together, they'll slide around a lot. So if I give it a little break, I let that water soak into the clay, then the pieces don't slip and slide over each other, and I can come back and I can make it look pretty once those pieces are firmly attached to each other.
Okay, so this project doesn't require tools, right? We've made it this far without a lot of tools. But if you have them, something like this that has a rounded end here, something that kind of feels like the shape of your thumb or like a rounded over finger, those will be good tools. Like a wider pad here will help with broader areas. If you need to get into a narrow area, look for something narrower. So I'm going to try to use something like this, something that's in between in size. And remember, when we're doing this, you want to support the clay in the palm of your hand, and I can use a tool like this. Now, the other thing about this is you're not feeling it directly with your hands. So you've got to think about, okay, I don't want to destroy the lip while I'm doing this. So I'm going to get my tool in here and just start to swipe and try to push some of that clay out. And hopefully you can feel this on the palm of your hand while you're doing it. So just pay real close attention to how that clay feels as you're moving it using a tool. And see here, I'm taking it completely out when I rotate it because I don't want to accidentally damage anything while I'm doing that. The other thing that using a tool is going to do is it's going to rough up the inside surface. It doesn't have the same finesse as using your fingers. But as you gain more experience, you may enjoy using a tool more. I don't enjoy using tools all the time, but they are necessary sometimes. Okay, see how that's changed my shape? I don't have as straight of a line here. It's more curved, more like a belly. It's feeling less heavy on the bottom. Funny thing about a pot feeling heavy is that we have this mental picture of how heavy something's gonna be based on looking at it. So when I look at this pot, if I pick it up and I go, ooh, that feels heavy, what that means is that my lip is thin and that my walls are secretly thick. If you want your pots to feel light or natural weight, you want the lip of your pot to be the same thickness as the rest of your walls. If your pot feels heavy, that means you have more clay that you can work with and push out. If your pot feels light, you've done some pottery magic where you've made your lip slightly thicker and your walls slightly thinner. Okay, so if you want that, if that's one of your goals is to make light feeling pots, focus on making sure your lip doesn't look too thin. I'm gonna try to get my fingers in here just to kind of smooth over that surface. You could also use like a sponge. Just make sure it's not too wet, so it's a little damp so that I can move it around more easily. Okay, so I don't recommend doing this a lot. Introducing a lot more water with the sponge can cause a lot of problems with your pot later. And I'm really gonna try to get rid of some of these little gouges. When you have a lot of gouges in the bottom and you can't get your fingers down there, something like this that's rounded over the bottom, or this, is gonna work better for you here. Now, the closed form like this, the inside doesn't matter as much, you're not gonna see it as much, and if you use the right glaze, you're gonna cover up a lot of that, so We're not gonna stress about the inside, okay? We are going to focus, not stress, but focus on the outside, right? This texture is real rough. We're gonna come back and smooth that out, but I do wanna let the clay kind of sit up and dry a little bit more. So we're gonna work on this bowl a little bit more. So I've just had it sitting out while we worked on this closed form. So I wanna start thinking about the final shape of this, and I really wanna push it out, right? So I'm looking at like a bowl like this really has a wide scoop. I could make a more straight edged bowl. I could make the rounded side. You could just be happy with it feels bowlish, and I don't know exactly what my walls are doing, but they did it. That's fine. So I'm gonna start again with the foot. Always start with the foot because the clay that's collected there has to go somewhere. So if we push the clay of the foot out, it's gonna go up to the wall. And then when it gets to the wall, we're gonna push it up towards the lip or out. Again, supporting the bottom. Again, not setting it on my desk. That's tempting, right? I have students do this all the time. But when you do that, you create a corner here that's gonna have too much clay in it. So if you do find yourself doing this, right, because it is convenient, make sure that then you spend time getting that extra clay out of the corner here, pushing that clay out.
Pushing that clay, I'm kind of swiping it towards the edge, trying to make the clay of the foot center. Then I'm gonna start to work up that corner into the wall. When I do that, it is going to bubble out the foot, and so I am going to tap it on the table to flatten it back out so that it rests more easily, just like this, because we don't want our bowl to wobble, right? Don't want the bowl to tip over. So flatten out that bottom, and then I'm going to keep working around here. So I'm really pulling that clay up and outward, using whatever pinching motion feels right, works best for you, whatever's going to get the results you're looking for, right? So if this kind of motion where I'm putting my fingers inside and swiping around, if that's helping get your clay where you want it, and that's really the trick, right? There's not really a big secret to making better pots. The big secret is paying attention to what's happening. When I do this, what result do I get? When I push the clay this way, what happens? How does it move? The other thing I like about these swiping pinches is look how smooth that is. I love that it makes this wall of the pot really smooth. Still, remember, we're trying to make this wider. Okay, so now I'm gonna work higher up on the wall. So I'm gonna lay that part on my palm and continue to press the clay out there. Swiping sideways, maybe working from the bottom up. That's gonna help also create that gradual curve in the wall. Doing such big swipes like this helps me maintain the thickness of my clay. Now I'm gonna go around like this, keep pressing it out. And I do wanna really start to open up the lip here, right? Because it's a bowl, the lip has to be the widest part. That swiping motion also helps prevent cracks. It's not perfect, doesn't prevent them altogether, but it does help because it's compressing that clay in the direction we want to go. Now, one thing I don't want to happen is I don't want to have this sort of bowl shape and then a sudden flare. That's not my style. So I'm going to make sure that as I'm going, I'm looking at what that outside profile looks like and making it the shape that I want. I'm also feeling how thick my clay is, right? Is there a thick spot here? Okay, let me pinch some of that and push that thicker area into a thinner area. My bowl is getting so much bigger, right? And that's because we're pressing all that clay out. So it's got to go somewhere. It's going to make the bowl bigger. It's really getting out around. So I'm just going to take a little time here. Go, okay, I need this bowl to be round. So I'm going to get it back into round. Now I am setting it down, but I'm not pushing down on the clay. I'm just taking this time to go around the lip and really make sure, like, if there's a thin area that I can push some clay back into it, or wherever there's a thick area, I can kind of spread that clay out. I'm also thinking about what I want that final profile of the lip to look like. I don't want it to be cupped back in. So I'm going to push it out. Make sure that it's either facing directly up or slightly flared out. Now, something that may happen to you is you may get a really big crack. So now I'm going to do something crazy. What happens if you've got a really big crack like this? Oh my gosh, what happened? How did this happen? If you get a really big crack like this, you're going to take your needle tool and you're going to score the inside of one side like this. And you're going to score the outside just really mess it up, take your sponge or just get a little water with your finger and just dab it into there so you can see some water built up in those score marks. Then I dry my hand on my towel, and instead of pushing the clay into each other like this, I'm gonna overlap it like this. Okay, now it's gonna be thick, but then I can pinch it together and actually spread it back out. I don't wanna do all that at one time, so I'm gonna leave it like this, and I'm gonna come back to it after that water has had time to soak in or dry out. Okay, I'm gonna go around where all these cracks are and score across them. Really move that clay around. I'll score over this. About to move it around a lot. Gonna help it anyway. Whenever you use a tool like this, make sure you get that clay off of it. Don't leave it on there. If you leave clay built up on your tools, it holds water that can make your tools rust or grow mold. So don't leave it on there too long. Now, I can go around with my sponge. It's got a little water in it, start to smooth those score marks out. Then I can go back over it with my finger. Pressing the clay back in where the lip feels too thin, pressing or pinching it out, or wider where it feels too thick. Notice how wobbly that's made my lip, adding that much water. That's why we don't want to add too much water. We don't want to make our clay wobbly. We're letting it dry in a very intentional way so that it holds its strength and holds its shape. Okay, let's come back to this folded over spot here. So right here, you can feel where that crack ended. It's gonna be a little bit thicker, feel a little bit like a point or an indent. So I'm gonna really pinch that there and smooth that, blend it into the rest of the body. And I'm gonna work my way up, and I can push the clay together like this to really make sure it's firmly connected. And then also swipe, pinch it to really smooth it out and blend it back. It looks really rough when you first start doing it. But that's the funny thing about clay, is sometimes you gotta make it look bad before it can look good. And look, like it never happened. That's crazy. This is one of those things that continues to amaze me, even though I know that it's true, even though I know it's possible. When I do it, I'm like, no. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it does work. That lip is feeling pretty even if I look around. There are some thinner areas, some wider areas, but I can come back to that before I'm completely done. Right now, I want to start feeling the rest of it. My lip is probably as thin as I want it to be. So I want to pinch this, be like, okay, this is how thin I want it. What does that feel like? How does that feel in my finger when I bring my fingers that close together around the clay? Then I'm gonna pinch further down. Ooh, this spot feels a little bit different. It feels a little bit thicker. I'm gonna smooth some of that out. But we don't really wanna start up high. We wanna start at the foot. All that clay has to go somewhere. So if we start at the foot, it has somewhere to go. If we start up here and we push that clay down and down, it's gonna just get thicker around the foot. So I'm gonna start to feel the foot, feel how thick the clay wall is here. And now I'm only pinching it where it feels thicker than other areas. And if I have an area that feels thinner, I'm trying to push that thickness into that thin area. It's not gonna be perfect. Your clay wall is not gonna be perfectly symmetrical. We're doing this by hand, so that's gonna be normal. If you have a thin area and you don't have any clay that you can push into it, leave it alone. It's the best thing you can do. The other thing we're doing here is really smoothing out that texture. For me, the inside always ends up smoother than the outside. I have to really think about smoothing the outside. My outside looks rough. We're gonna get to that. Really pay attention if you're getting a lot of like score marks like this. How are you holding your hand? What's causing those marks, right? So that's my thumbnail. I'm gonna swipe back over those, and I'm gonna try to hold my thumb slightly differently so that that doesn't happen. So if you're getting weird marks, try to feel like, what am I doing? What's causing that mark? Now, at this point, while we're doing more of this refining work, if you feel like the bowl's just kind of like wobbly and getting away from you, your clay's too wet. So if the shape of the bowl is getting away from you, you're not able to control it, it's time to set it down and take a break. Now, if you're working on 2 pots, hopefully your other pot is at a good point where you can keep working on it. If they're both kind of wet, they both need a break, take a break. Maybe work on a 3rd pot. So this pot is as thin as I'm gonna make it. The walls are pretty even. I feel happy about this. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start working on my outside. Notice how like when I pinch it a little bit, I can move it a little, but it's feeling a lot stiffer. What I don't wanna do is add too much water and make it soft and really malleable again. So I'm gonna take my scoring tool here. You could just use a needle tool if you don't have a serrated rib like this. And I'm gonna go over this little spot in 2 directions, really roughing that up. And then I'm gonna dab it with some water. And then I can put my fingers in here to support it. I can smooth that with my thumb or my fingers, or I can take the smooth side of a rib and really just so pretty, smooth that out. Sometimes I can see shadow scoring, so I want to make sure that I don't see any score marks when I'm done. This clay is firm enough that I can put some gentle pressure on it without support on the inside, but I want to be careful. Don't want to create an indentation here. And as I'm going, if I find a thin spot, I may find myself working on pinching rather than smoothing. And that's okay. Going back and forth on steps is normal. Okay, look at how smooth that is now. Okay, let's do the next spot. One thing that I find beginner potters often do is they don't think about their final texture. Your pot has a couple different ways that people experience it. We experience the overall form, but we also experience that final texture. What does that look like? Do you want it to be smooth? Do you want it to be rough? You gotta pick. If you leave it, it's gonna feel unfinished. But if you exaggerate that, if you put more cracks in it, that'll feel intentional and can create cool textures when you glaze it. You could also leave it scored. That rough texture could be what you like, but I'm gonna show you how to smooth it. I like it smooth, so that's what I'm gonna do. Now, if you just have the one rib, it's serrated on one side, it's got a smooth edge here, I can just use that smooth edge of that serrated rib. But if you've got a plastic rib, it may have some more flex to it and be a little bit easier to use. Go over it and buff it with my finger. If you really want it to be smooth, there's this technique called burnishing where you take something like the back of a spoon or a river stone and you really go over the surface after it's really late leather hard or bone dry. And that's some pretty work. Now, when you're using that rib, it's not at 90 degrees to the pot, it's at 45. So look at the difference. It's not like this, because that'll scrape off. It's like this. That allows the clay to be picked up and pressed down. So we're compressing that clay from the high ridges that we're creating into the low ridges. And if you've got a spot that feels particularly low, you can take some of that slip or kind of wet clay and really press it in there, buff it in. The other thing that beginner potters forget is to think about their foot, making their foot look pretty. So I'm gonna sign this later, but let's make it look pretty right now. And I don't necessarily have to get my fingers in there. The shape of the pot should support itself, especially because of how much it's dried so far. If you find that as you're doing this, the clay's collapsing really easily, your clay's too wet. Take a break. I'm gonna go over this in multiple directions, really buff it out. And this also can allow me to really define that foot. So if I want it to have a nice definite edge, I can kind of push the bottom up a little bit so that it has a ring that it'll sit on instead of sitting on the whole bottom. Okay, that looks so good. I'm gonna get this one last spot here. Typically, you can't just fill in a spot like that with slip, that watered down clay, because that slip has more water to lose. So if you just plug a hole with slip, it's wetter than the rest of the clay, it's gonna shrink more. That hole is going to show back up later. But since this slip is made from the clay that I just scraped off with the serrated rib, it's dried and aged along with the rest of this pot, and so it doesn't actually have as much water in it. So I can plug this hole. It's more likely to work since this clay is the same age. I'm going to go one more pass around the lip here and try to really smooth that out, keeping my thumb underneath to keep the shape the way that I want. Now, if you wanted here, you could pinch this lip up and have it kind of flare out a little bit. That would be okay. That's just not what I'm doing. Okay, that looks good. Now, our last step is gonna be to sign the foot. So I'm just gonna use my needle tool here. Some other tools, if you have these, are some sort of little ball points. This one's really big, so I'd probably use this smaller end. You could also just, if you have a pencil, use that if you don't have a needle tool. Hopefully you have a needle tool. This is a mechanical pencil. Probably putting clay in it isn't great for it. So a dull pencil would actually work really well here. Be intentional with your signature. How you do it now probably isn't going to be how you do it later. We all change as we develop our skills, but make your signature something you like. Maybe you just use your initials. Maybe it's not even a signature. Maybe it's a maker's mark. I had one student who signed everything with a little cat doodle. I like to make my name curve around. A lot of my students usually just write their name across the middle. You do you. I just took a little break to let this stiffen up a little bit more. Let's take a look at our bowl. It's still pretty flexible. but I think we're going to be okay. My inside texture on this pot looks pretty good. So now I'm going to work on my outside texture. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to pay attention to the profile here, to this curve, and I want to make that more even. So as I'm going around, I'm going to try and get whatever that shape is. If I want it to be more straight, more rounded, I'm going to try to get it to be the same on all sides. I'm just going to do that with some swiping motion, and then we'll get into fixing the texture here. Doing the same motion, and I do that all the way around, that should help make that profile the same all the way around, but it's not perfect because people aren't perfect. Now, this has a really organic lip. It's really uneven, but the thickness is even. So that's okay. That feels intentional, and we can let it be this sort of uneven lip. I'm not going to do the trick that we showed on the closed form, but if you want to, you can take some time, cut off high points, use that clay from the high points to fill in low points. But I'm going to go ahead and start working on my texture on the outside here. So you can see it's real rough. Let's start right here. Serrated rib. Now with this one, because the lip is open, it doesn't close back in. It's going to need more support on the inside. So I can take my fingers and do that. I could also take like a dry sponge and put that on the inside like this to make it a little bit easier to support. You do have to be careful with that because you can still press the clay in, but that can help hold the bowl a little bit better. Also, if you're having trouble balancing the bowl, another thing you can do is create a little pillow to hold it with your towel here. So just fold up your towel a little bit, and then you can roll up the edges like a scroll. And then I'm actually going to turn it over like this. And now it's kind of like a neck pillow, but it's a bowl pillow. So I can set my bowl in it to help support and cushion it as I rotate it. The drawback here is that it can push your bowl flat if it's still pretty wet. So if your bowl is drier, this will actually be better, but you can work on it at this stage. And so that towel just adds a little cushion to make it so that I'm not completely putting all of the bowl's weight on the lip, and I can use this sponge if that feels right. Okay. A little bit of water here. Remember, this sponge, I've squeezed out most of the water, and then I'm just dabbing it, just making it damp, not even wet. A little rib. And you can see when I get close to the lip, it's wanting to give more, so I'm going to put better support under the lip. So I am going to go around and smooth all of this and get rid of all those cracks, but then on this pot, I'm going to do a texture. I'm not just going to smooth it. I am going to smooth it because I don't want those cracks and stuff underneath my texture. I would encourage you, we're making 2 pots, pick one and add texture to it. Add some sort of decoration. You don't have to, nobody's making you, but sometimes when I would teach this lesson, I would tell students to decorate one of their pots. And sometimes they would want to decorate both of them, and I was completely fine with that. Now notice I'm scraping over it this direction, not directly up, so I don't flatten it out. I'm going kind of around the curve, not this way. I'm going at a diagonal. I find that that preserves the shape better. And then I'm also going this way, so I'm kind of crisscrossing, right? Going bottom to top, left to right, and then top to bottom, right to left. That way I'm crossing over it in 2 directions, making it twice as smooth. If I go up like this, I'm going to end up with a straighter edge. I'm not going to preserve that curve. So if you want a straight-sided bowl, by all means, go from foot to lip. But if you want it to be round, going at an angle is going to help. Now here, the lip, I really need to go around and make sure that the lip looks really good. It's a little bit harder to smooth out the lip on this one, just because it's not as compressed, it's not as tight. And because this lip is so flexible, it's real easy to do damage to it while trying to correct it or trying to make it better. So if you find that you're doing more damage than good, take a break. Maybe wrap it up in a bubble for the day and come back tomorrow. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, last little section. Okay, just gonna double tap that foot, make sure it's nice and stable. Okay, we're gonna do some texture on this one. Now you could do texture with anything. You could do it with the end of a needle tool, put some little dots on it. If you've got some different size tools, you can do some textures with those. Like I can put some circles in with this. These have some scraping abilities. Anything you want. The important thing is that when you're adding that texture, you're supporting the opposite side. Now with a bowl, if I want to eat out of this, I don't want to put texture on the inside. But if it's just for decoration or if it's for your keys or something, decorating the inside can be nice because that's the part that you mostly see. I'm gonna go ahead and just stick to decorating the outside. Seashells make really good texture presses. Oh, I have this butter thing. Forget what this is called, but it's just got this ridged texture. Let's see what happens if I use that. I'm gonna use this little sponge here. Now, if I paddle this, I'm going to transfer the texture, but I'm also going to change the shape, so I want to be mindful. Not transferring a lot of texture. That's not really anything yet. Let's do something more. What else? I've got these little biscuit cutters. I'm not going to cut it. I just want to get that wavy edge. I don't know. This isn't really anything yet. If I did it a lot, though, it could be something. Or you can be like, I don't like what I'm doing here, and just say, nope, don't like that, smooth it back out. If you want to smooth the texture back out, make sure that you go crossways to it, so that you're pulling the clay up from the surface next to it and pressing it back in. So not with it necessarily, but against it. You might have some little carving tools like this. You can do some fluting. Depending on how thick your walls are, you can carve some clay away. I'm not liking that, so I'm just gonna get that clay wet and stick it back in there and pinch it back in. Ugh. Just trying to show you some different things, but I'm not happy with what I'm getting. If this clay was drier, I could probably do some better carving like that. So really, you want your clay to be leather hard before you carve. Okay, let's do something tried and true. So I'm just gonna take my serrated rib here and I'm gonna create some scratches on the surface. I wanna go all the same direction and I'm just gonna do a slight curve here that goes around the surface rather than vertical. And it's okay if they overlap, and if they're messy, I just want them all going the same direction. And if this was a cup or something you're gonna drink out of, you might wanna stop before you get to the lip because you don't want a rough texture on your lip. That's unpleasant. All right. So now we just have a little carved spiral texture. I like that a lot. Now, you see all these little burrs and bits of clay sticking up? I'm not going to try and get those off right now because I'll just end up mushing them into my texture. Instead, I'm going to let this dry, and once they're dry, I can brush them off with a soft glazing brush. Let's go ahead and sign this though. Not going to go in a circle this time. And then on the inside, I'll just make sure I didn't put any fingernail marks in here. I'm just going to set this also face down. They're both sitting on their rim because I wrote my name and it had all these burrs come up, all these little bits of clay that stick out, and I want to be able to wipe those off after it dries.
Okay, that's it. You've done it. You've made 2 pinch pots. Or you've seen how to do it at least. Once this pot was bone dry, I was able to wipe off all the burrs and keep the nice texture. It's a lot easier to get rid of those burrs now before it's bisque fired. Once it's bisque fired, they'd be so permanent I'd have to sand the pot, and I just like to work smarter, not harder. When you're done, there's a couple things you can do. You can set them out to completely dry. Mine are bone dry now, ready to be fired. You could also wrap them up in a bag, which is actually what I did. Since I was having problems with cracks developing in the lip, I wanted to slow down the drying process, so I put both of my pots inside of a plastic bag and filled it with air and then closed it up. What that does is it slows the drying process down and it allows the moisture in the clay to homogenize. So if your clay has been kind of difficult or you've added a lot of attachments and maybe different parts of your pot have different levels of dryness, wrapping them in a sealed bag but having that air bubble allows the water to homogenize across the clay so that it dries more evenly. This can prevent things like warping, cracking, or even whole attachments coming apart. If you're wrapping your pots up to slow dry them, make sure that the wooden board doesn't go in the bag. If you have a plastic bat or a plastic board that you're drying on, that can be okay to go in the bag. But if you wrap up a wooden board with your pot, it will absorb water as well, and it can grow mold or warp the board. So my trick for wrapping up my pots but putting them on a wooden board is I put the bag or the plastic on the wooden board, then I put my pots in the plastic on top of the board. This makes it easier to move my pots around if I need to put them on a shelf or get them out of the way, but also make sure that I'm not damaging things like my bats or my wearboards. Now that you've made these 2 pinch pots, you know everything you need to make any kind of pinch pot. Change the amount of clay you're using, you can make any size. Change the way you pinch, you can make any shape you want. If you're not in love with your first pinch pot, don't feel bad. I don't think most people like their first pinch pot. I know I don't. I had no idea how to make this, and so that's the texture from my knuckles. I keep it around just because it's a record. If you're not in love with your first pinch pot, you don't have to fire it. You can just recycle it. Now that you know how, you can always make another one. That's it for this one. Hope you had fun. Happy potting.